But if you're
Yeah.
running like a conversion campaign, that there is nothing more powerful than a conversion campaign running in store because they can physically reach out and grab it. That's why I think so much of the retail media, is definitely becoming so powerful because it is so bottom of the funnel.
Today on Customerland, I have the enormous pleasure of reintroducing two people. We've already been talking about this topic for about 45 minutes and decided we should introduce the people I'm speaking with. Matt Elsley and Nick Larkins are co-founders of a really interesting retail media platform called QSIC. So I want to first welcome Matt and Nick to the program. Appreciate this, especially considering the fact that you're in a near time zone and not the far time zone I originally thought you were in. But Matt, Nick, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it. And maybe if you would, we'll start with you, Matt. Tell us just a little bit about your role at QSIC, and then Nick, maybe you could follow on.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Mike. So Matt Elsley, I'm CEO and co-founder with Nick at QSIC. My background was in computer networking and infrastructure. I worked a lot with point of sale systems, so very heavy database systems. So that's where I sort of got my first exposure to point of sale data, how it functioned, how to move it around, and that was, it became like a staple of QSIC and what we do here, because everything that we do is based on data. We try to make data-driven decisions on everything that we do, and learn really from everything that we do.
Thanks for having us, Mike. Nick Larkins, obviously Matt's co-founder. My background's been in audiovisual since I left university. So been deploying, audio and video systems in, this actually started in the commercial kind of space of, working on like stadiums and courtrooms and, universities, and really kind of cut my teeth at the convergence of like the analog AV industry, evolving into the digital industry. So, and I've basically stuck with that since, I left uni and met with Matt, and we started our own business, and and it's evolved into what we're doing today. So it's exciting to be on here with you, and looking forward to getting stuck into the conversation, which we've already had.
Right. Everything's backwards in customer land. It would be really interesting if we can to just to go back to what your thought processes were, 10-ish years ago. I think theoretically you could say, oh, there's a great value proposition here, but outside of a couple of tiny little niche markets, there probably wasn't a lot of awareness of the opportunity. So, I mean, what was your headspace at that point? What were you kind of doing with all that, mental energy, and how did you put this together?
Yeah, it was more the evolution of an idea, I think, than having this epiphany that this value exchange was here. Nick and I, we had a company together before this one called Easy Control, where we were doing home automation, and through that we were really introduced to how audio functioned. We were doing it in all these high-end homes. We were doing very sophisticated multi-zone sound systems in those homes, and automating that in-store, that in-home experience, right? And as that business sort of grew, we sort of started doing larger jobs and commercial jobs, and we were introduced to how music and audio was really handled in businesses. And what struck us is it just really hadn't changed much in 70 years. It was still speaker to amplifier, and we were putting smart speakers in. It was all IP enabled, and we were doing all this really cool automation stuff in homes. And then we were like, well, businesses have way more to gain from doing this. Then we started doing more of that. We had to solve a whole bunch of licensing issues to be involved in the business sort of sector. So then we were introduced to how, like, why were people playing the music in store that they were? And we were like, well, is there any feedback loop? In homes, we have a whole bunch of sensors. And in the commercial sector, they didn't really have anything. So we were originally setting out to go, well, how do we prove that music drives revenue? And that was a very difficult problem to solve. It's quite abstract, right? It's not as binary to say I played this song and I got this outcome.
Right.
And we found some really interesting things about steering human behavior through music, because it's such an emotive, powerful medium, particularly in space. And we found that, like, higher beats per minute, louder music. This could, in a fast-moving cafe, this could turn the tables faster because it would get people moving, right? In fine dining, the reverse was really true. You could play slower music, slower BPM, lower volume, and sort of encourage people to buy that second bottle of wine, get that dessert, relax. And while we thought that we could do this, it was far from conclusive. And that's when we started onboarding a lot of people from the gas and convenience sector. And we were looking at, okay, well, we can be far more literal here. Like, what if we play an ad for a Pepsi or Coca-Cola or Red Bull? And let's measure the impact. So then we had to sort of pioneer, well, how do we measure? Well, we need transactional data. What is the model of attribution that we're going to be using? We've gone through several different versions of it. We've really pioneered it in this particular space. But when you could start seeing it working and you can learn from it, that was when we started seeing real power in it. And that's where we were like, okay, there is a real value exchange here, both from the CPG brands, potentially with non-endemic brands, with the retailers. But the problem when we really had that epiphany is that we first of all had to explain that there was value in this market for these retailers and the brands. Then we had to explain how the platform captured that captured that value, and then how do we grow it over time. Fast forward to today.
It was funny too, because when we started that, the presentation back to the retailer was always, hey, we're proving that we're selling more of this product. This is the capability that we're bringing, is that you play a campaign and we sell more product. And that resonated, right? But it's also, you're not tangible in seeing the money in your hand. Whereas if you sell that as an advertising kind of product, that's, money in the hand, right? With high margins. And that's, that's what retail media has actually, is brought to the kind of retail space, is that, it's an incremental kind of revenue that has huge margins attached to it. Just extra dollars in the pocket.
I'm curious as to what point in the evolution of this big thought did it become trackable and to the point where the people you were pitching it to were starting to grasp it. And the reason I'm asking that question is because, as we mentioned a minute ago, retail media became a force unto itself about, call it 2 years ago, at least here in the States. And yet you guys have been at it for 10-ish. What point in that interim period did the retailers themselves start to go, wait a second, this could actually work? And what did it take?
Yeah, I reckon between 24 to 36 months ago, I reckon your time frame is pretty right with when everyone started seeing the value. But also, a lot of what we're talking about here, this kind of value exchange, people have been selling this in these industries for a really long time, but now it's got a sexier wrapper on it. Everyone's talking about it, and really with sort of with the death of online cookies and all these other channels that have been really strong and being challenged about their validity moving forward, advertisers are looking at how do we access the audiences moving forward. And when you look at retail, and most of the major retailers in the US, 80 to 85% of their transactions are all still happening in store. And when you look at that from an audience perspective, that makes the audience, 4 or 5 times the size in store as opposed to online.
Right.
But what they don't have is sophisticated channels in there yet. So the inventory wasn't there to purchase. And that was the thing that really kicked it all off, which is, it's an exciting space to be in. But because of its transitioning from buying online to like buying offsite or in store, they're used to having measurement as part of that media purchase. They're used to having attribution. They're used to having some kind of data context around why it was placed there. How did it go? How did it perform? What did we learn from it? What do we do next? And this is a very new construct for in-store particularly. But it's so valuable because it's where all the audience sits.
Yeah, I can tell you just anecdotally that, all of everybody in advertising, since advertising was invented, has been talking about tracking attribution and how wonderful the latest whatever it was happened to be. But I don't think, and I'm a cynic. I've been in this industry a long time. I love the industry, but I'm also very, very cynical about it. It wasn't until retail media showed up in its current form, I think, where you could really talk about in-store attribution with any validity. I mean, before that, it was really difficult to assign a direct ROI to any kind of activity. And it seems like, if only for that reason, that now this is trackable, this is attributable in some pretty interesting, crazy, cool ways. I think a lot of the retailers are starting to go, oh, this is really cool. Plus, depending on who you are, it's also potentially a significant revenue source.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
but it's also what are the brands themselves trying to encourage? Because attribution, if you're running an awareness campaign, can also still be tricky. But if you're running like a conversion campaign, that there is nothing more powerful than a conversion campaign running in store, because they can physically reach out and grab it. That's why I think so much of the retail media, is definitely becoming so powerful, because it is so bottom of funnel. That attribution layer is there; it does exist. But also, there's some really interesting things now that are starting to spill out of it, particularly like with platforms like QSIC, is that the creative element. We can actually learn a lot from how the creative is actually built, under what context, price, promotion, male, female, all these different attributes become measurable, when we're building them through features like Lucy, which is an AI-driven like content creator, which is incredibly exciting, because the brands themselves want to know, how does creative inform how they're engaging with their audience. And this is like definitely a new frontier, for us and really everyone else in the space.
I think
please go right ahead, Nick.
No, I was just going to touch on too how important the environment, that the in-store environment, and for us, we've got a rich background in C-store, and obviously the value of the store to the value that in-store brings to the C-store industry is by far much more valuable than anything that they could sell online. Impulse buy, the environment's small, and you want to run a conversion campaign, where you can influence at the point of purchase, with a consumer in the mindset of, look, I'm open to suggestion. That also plays a big part in us being really successful in what we do, and the type of network that we're activating in as well. So yeah, physical world environment plays a massive part in in the success of a retail media network.
A groundswell starts small, quietly building into something powerful, unstoppable. That's also how market momentum works. If you're launching a startup, introducing a new product, rebranding, or rolling out a new service or initiative, it's not enough to simply show up. You need to build momentum strategically. Specializing in go-to-market strategy, Groundswell works with organizations at every stage, creating custom plans that help products and brands break through the noise and grow, ensuring a launch that doesn't just happen, it sticks. From understanding your target audience to perfecting your positioning, Groundswell's approach ensures you're not just catching the market's attention, but keeping it. With expert guidance, your product moves from launch day to long-term success, turning that initial wave of excitement into sustained growth. If you're ready to take your product, service, or brand to market, it might be time to think about a Groundswell strategy. Visit groundswell.cc to learn more. There's a conversational dogleg that I should avoid just to keep us on track here, but it's too much fun not to at least mention is that, a good chunk of our audience and listenership operates in the CX space, customer experience. And that's got all kinds of little subgroups and definitions. But overall, what's becoming really clear to myself and anybody else in that space is that experience is almost everything, because experience is tied to the emotional aspects of how you're perceiving what you're going through, which has much more to do with, the mindset you're being, you're showing up with, and the mindset you're being kind of designed towards. And it seems like what you're doing, it's clear that what you're doing through QSIC can have a huge effect on mindset, on feelings, and some of the drivers behind what people are feeling at any given moment and what they do with those as it relates to a purchase or sticking around a restaurant for the bottle of wine. So I only mention that because I'd love to prompt another conversation there sometime in the future when the dust has settled and everything we're all doing, because you're right in the thick of that experiential marketing explosion. And I think you have something to say that's really valuable, because it's not just theoretical. So we'll leave that there for now. And Aubrey and I will get back in touch and talk about it.
But it is that's a super interesting topic, and one that we're really passionate about. And that's, activating in store begins with the store, right? Like, we want to make sure like our product is as good as the speaker that it's coming out of. So, making sure that in-store experience is, as premium as we can get it, is a huge factor in how successful I think we're going to be as well as a business for the retailer. And then, above and beyond the kind of customer experience, it's also employee experience, right?
Sure.
We're enhancing that experience and making them happier. And if they're happier, they're going to do a better job at, selling and making sure that their customers are happier. So there's so many things that we kind of touch in regards to the experience. It's huge. And I think that there's, retailers are starting to put a huge emphasis on that as well. It's like, how do you compete against the online world where you've got this physical asset that can create really unique experiences that the online world can't give you? So let's start investing there.
I'm going to say this was about a year and a half ago when the statistic that kind of rocked the US and retail advertising world came out, that there was predicted to be, I don't remember the dollar figure, but it was a humongous chunk of digital ad spend that was forecast to be moved over into retail media. And to the tune of, I think it was like 20% or something like that, which is just big enough where nobody really believed it until it started settling in. And people went, wow, the potential here that certain big retailers are starting to understand and invest in is giant. So congrats to you for maybe creating the wave and being able to ride it. We keep talking about success comes in all different forms, but I think we'd be remiss in not just mentioning recent news that QSIC reported over a 220% year-over-year growth, which is not terrible. It's pretty darn impressive by any measure. So first, congrats there, but maybe you can just talk a little bit about what's behind that growth. I mean, what is it beyond the kind of, technology ideas? It takes boots on the ground. It takes deals being made. It takes deployment in real world spaces and time. So how have you managed all that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it also goes back to what we touched on earlier, is that because there's such a huge audience in store and a lot of the technology, the retailers don't have these channels in store yet. They don't have the inventory where all the audience is to commercialize. And then you start looking at, okay, so what is the technology stack that the retailer is going to be building? And first of all, they think screens, then they think audio, and maybe potentially end caps and posters and digital shelf labels and the like, right? So they design what they think they're going to do, but more often than not, the budgets don't allow to do everything all at once, right? But they know there is this commercial value there. And so the things that they start looking at is what has the biggest return on investment. For the dollars that I do have, how do we get retail media dollars flowing in the fastest possible manner to the greatest yield that can then start funding the rest of the components going in? Mm-hmm. And one thing that audio has over any other channel, that it's one of the most valuable inventory that you can build. But the return on invested capital for audio is far higher than just about anything else that you're going to put in store. Because audio, we can go into an amplifier, or we can put a couple of speakers up, and we can blanket very large spaces. So the coverage is amazing. If we do it with IP-based speakers, there's the potential that we could zone it off and create even further inventory. But you can't really put a screen everywhere you look. And that doesn't mean to say that you don't do screens. You definitely do, because all the research that we've done ourselves is that screens and audio together always outperform from a retail media perspective, either one in isolation. So it's not about which one are you going to do and not do the others. It's just about which ones do you do first. And more often than not, when the retailers are doing their calculations, it's an audio first strategy, because it is a lower lift in store. It's faster to deploy, it's cheaper, and the revenue potential is almost the same as screens anyway. So, and then that's the thing that gets the ball rolling. And I think that that's a really big part of why we're sort of seeing this growth, because there isn't those components in store. And when they do it, it makes way more sense to go audio first than any other channel.
So in leading up to this conversation, doing a little bit of background on QSIC and what you've been up to, you've got a clear footprint in C-Store. And I think I read somewhere that one of your accounts was, had over 1,000 outlets, which is pretty big by any measure. Deploying on that scale from something, as you just said, that there's probably no existing context for. There's probably not a whole lot of existing technology that supports this. You're almost showing up from scratch, I would imagine, technologically to put this together. Can you get a little bit into the weeds about what that deployment looks like at scale? Because there are a handful of people who listen to this who run sizable operations, and if this sounds interesting to them, scale and investment or investment to scale are going to be some of the early questions they ask.
And doing anything at scale is difficult, right? And doing it well is even harder. But like we said, we've been doing this for 10 years. Like, we've become domain experts in this space because we've learned every which way not to install these things in
Is
store.
that right?
Yeah. So, but you're right. It takes a lot. Like, we are a physical world technology. So there is a hardware component, not that we manufacture it, but there is, as Nick pointed out, we're only as good as the speakers that we come out of. But we have our own logistics teams, we have our own operational teams, we have support divisions. We work with some of the biggest and the best installation partners across both hemispheres in the world, and yeah, it's the way that we can scale the platform the way that we do is because we're highly automated. Due to our backgrounds. Like, we started in automation. So automating infrastructure makes it easy for the people in store because they don't need to do anything. Like, when we go and install a system into stores, no one touches volume. No one turns the playlist on and off. No one does anything. The system will turn itself on and off. It'll dynamically adjust volume. We've got a whole bunch of patented technology around dynamically adjusting volume based on how loud the environment is or how busy it is. And it's these kinds of things that we've removed so much of the friction points in managing audio that naturally pushed us very far up into the enterprise layer. And now we roll out stores, the store networks that are 10, 20,000 locations. Like, so we're doing very, very big networks now. And
it's sometimes overlooked, isn't it, really, from the product perspective? We're always out pitching retail media, and the success that we're having from advertising and building great, unique customer experiences. But there's so much value that we've built into the process of project management, installation, rolling these solutions out. We've almost productized it, right? Like Matt touching on automating it. Literally we'll have installers go into store, hang speakers, and then with our software be able to configure it in less than, kind of 5 minutes. And do that all kind of self-sufficiently, right? And we'll see it on our end, we'll get notified, and there's been a whole heap of development and investment from our end in that, because that is part of our service and our ongoing support as well, right? Like, we put a big emphasis on productizing that to make sure that we're providing the best customer experience possible for our partners. And it is hard, right? Like, a lot of people can overlook, rolling out throughout these networks, working with IT teams, working with finance teams to make sure that we can build a compelling business case for this channel in store. There's a lot that we've learned over time, working with big, large retailers on how they like to work, what is a compelling business case to get this rolled out. IT is like such an important factor in everything that we do, and it's not like it's the same process with every retailer. Like, IT teams are typically very different from retailer to retailer, and we've got to be flexible to work in with these kind of environments, and that's what puts a big emphasis on how we're building out QSIC to scale and roll out.
Does QSIC actually make the decisions behind what's played and how, or those decisions typically come from the marketing folks back at HQ?
Yeah. We tend to white glove service our customers, so we can work on the curation side with the marketing team, and they obviously approve everything that runs through. But we do have a creative services department that will work with the marketing department to approve the media and the content that's being activated across the network. Typically there's a close relationship between the marketing department and our creative services team.
Interesting. Where do you all manage inventory? Are you part of the exchanges, or how does, this is a new medium really that you've created here. So are you working on your own? You work out the creative on the QSIC side, or how does what does that pipeline look like?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we create the creative services team as well. Like we work with the retail media network or the agency to help them build out the creative. If they're going to run a campaign across QSIC, that'll then depending on whether they've optimized the campaign or not, work into the platform directly, and then the platform will then be able to optimize the campaign based off sales profiles for products that or the category that brand might be in, and then that's automated across the network. So we've got our own like kind of programmatic ad serving platform that
Okay.
runs that, but there is the capability to connect to SSPs, DSPs for further programmatic kind of non-endemic advertising that they might want to activate as well.
That's a lot of fun. I can't wait to explore some of that.
It's interesting though, like where the industry is at right now, because I think that like 1.0 of retail media was the rush to sort of the commerce, sort of the e-commerce sort of side. And yeah, it was interesting that, to get all those dollars sort of flowing, that was where everyone sort of leapt to. But then it was sort of like, we need the in-store component, because like that audience component isn't there. And so we've sort of, when we started looking at what they need in store, we do everything from hardware design, we do all the implementation, we'll do all the, like our retail media team will come in and help design the go-to-market strategy, and we can either run that for them, for the retailer, or we can support the internal function that they're building as well, or we can build it to then hand it back over to them. But then the platform itself is also all the analytics. It's actually the content creation based on data and insights. It's the measurement component of the platform, it's the inventory management. And so it's that entire sort of closed loop. But, it's what they've actually learned from that 1.0 was like the rush to programmatic is what you sort of touched on at the start, Mike. You can sort of be placed in inventory that is premium and then inventory that is sort of sub premium, and it's all sitting together, right? It's hard to differentiate in programmatic, right, which is the really valuable inventory. So I think the retail media internal divisions themselves that the retailers are creating have learned from that in 1.0, and 2.0 looks like a walled garden strategy. You want to buy the inventory into this 20,000 or 10,000, 15,000 store network. This is the only place you can get it right now. And what that does, it sort of frames the conversations with CPGs. It allows for, these are the data assets that you're going to get. These are the targeting capabilities. We're going to drive value for you guys. So we're going to focus on retail outcomes. We're going to learn from that, and we're going to optimize it over time. And that's going to change the price as we get better and better at this. I think phase 3, once you've done that, will be to take all the inventory that is maybe sub like second tier, like sort of inventory, right? And that will go to programmatic.
Okay.
But the walled garden strategy with the joint business planning that the retailers do with their brands, that's at the current phase of where it's at. It's direct.
Really interesting. So
I think the key there is that driving those retail outcomes as well, right? Like
right.
That if you can do and show and prove that, then the brand's going to continue to invest. Performance marketing, right? Like and you touched on it before at the start, Mike, about being very cynical on the industry about, I just ran this, I spent $100,000 on a campaign, but I got no idea whether it worked or not, right?
Right.
And now everyone's wisening up and leveraging. That's why retail media has become such a successful industry, is because it's given advertisers the ability to measure in a really granular way.
And there's a level of trust here because it's so visible, tangible, that I think far exceeds. I'm going to be hated for making this statement, but the trust levels in traditional DSPs and SSPs and the exchanges, because they, once your spend goes in, it goes into a series of black boxes, and you only hope that what comes out the other side has an ROI attached, regardless of what your sales rep is telling you, about how successful the campaign was. There's not a lot of visibility or transparency once you go into a traditional exchange environment. And yet with this, it's very direct still. You're still doing that. Well, thank you both for the time and for your thinking. I'll be sure to pay attention to what QSIC is up to, and I'm hoping that our paths will cross at some of these events and conventions. There's a ton of them out there, and as you guys make your way around the States, I'll look for you.
Absolutely. Love to catch up and have a beer.